Hello, welcome to our student panel. Thank you so much for taking some time out from your day to talk to our participants here at the Open Day. I thought it would be really good if we could start off with you each having sort of 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, I guess, depending on how much you want to say to start off with. Just to introduce yourself, where you're from, maybe what department you're working in, your project, what led you to apply to the DTP, colleges. I think actually probably our participants are going to be quite interested in colleges because they're a bit hard to find out information about. So you can visit college websites, but they don't really tell you much about the personality of the college. So that might be something that's quite interesting. And then, we'll open up the floor to questions, which there have been quite a lot of today. So who would like to start?
I'm happy to start.
Okay, Andrew, we've got a volunteer.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Andrew, if you start and then if you pass on to the next person, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrew. I'm a final year PhD student, and I'm originally from a little village called Sandwich in Kent. And I'm in the engineering science department, and I joined the environmental research doctoral training program as part of the physical climate system stream. And so before applying, I'd done an integrated master's where you do like a bachelor's and a master's all together in 4 years. And in the final year, we did like a year-long research project. And I just really enjoyed that experience. It was really fun to do research, to learn a lot about one topic and just like delve really deeply into that. I just, loved every minute of that. So on the one hand, I just really enjoyed research. And then I was also really passionate about trying to address some of the environmental issues. So kind of using the research skills to help address kind of a current environmental issue was something that was really exciting to me. And so my project is looking at the performance of large wind farms. So try and understand how large wind farms interact with the atmosphere and how that changes ultimately the power produced by the wind farms. So to try and better understand this, so then we can better predict these effects and then have a better idea about how our wind farms are going to produce power ahead of time to hopefully try and integrate them into our electricity grid more easily. And it's just been a really fun experience for 4 years just researching that. And college-wise, I'm part of a college called Trinity. And originally, I'd applied to a college called Wolfson College, just because it seemed like a really like low-key kind of friendly place. So apparently there's like no high table. It seems like very relaxed. There's no like big kind of gates at the front of it. So that kind of really attracted me. And I think then I applied to Wolfson and then I was moved to Trinity during the application process. I think sometimes it can happen. But Trinity is a very nice place as well. It's, I'd say, a bit of a smaller college. So I think there's maybe around 100 postgrads in total and roughly 10 to 20 PhD students per year. So it's quite a kind of a small place, but that means it's nice you get to know everyone really easily. They've got like a really friendly MCR, which is like kind of the graduate common room. And they've got really nice food as well, which is definitely a big plus. And student life wise, I just really enjoy the student lifestyle. You have a lot of freedom to just kind of do whatever you want. If something's interesting to you, you can just spend time learning about that. If it's not interesting, you just don't have to do it, which is really cool. So you just have a lot of freedom to look at what's interesting to you and find out more about what's interesting to you. And with that, I'll just hand over to the next panelist.
I'm happy to jump in. So I'm Nat. I'm in my third year of the DTP, and I'm originally from Scotland. I'm from Aberdeen, way up where it's cold and quite dark. And I the reason I came to apply was I did a 4-year undergrad in Aberdeen, and in my final year I was doing my like dissertation research type project, and I realized that I quite liked it and wanted to kind of move into a research type field, but I had no idea how to do that, and I didn't even know that you could like do a PhD and make money from it. I kind of thought that you had to kind of like pay to go do a master's and that kind of thing. No one in my family had kind of done anything like this. But my supervisor at the time kind of like referred me to the DTP website, and I kind of found it from there. And yeah, applied. I also was very kind of keen on the flexibility because I had no idea what I wanted to really focus on for 4 years. So kind of having the opportunity to like explore what interested me was really appealing. So now I am doing my DPhil in the departments of biology and geography. I have supervisors in both, which is really nice. And I study the effectiveness of biodiversity offsetting policies. So kind of how we account for our impact on the natural environment and whether that's effective. And it has like loads of different elements. I do a lot of field work, a lot of desk-based stuff, modeling, lab work as well. So I really like it because it's very exciting and very different with the seasons. So yeah, it's really cool. And yeah, when I was applying, kind of choosing a college I found quite difficult because I was quite apprehensive about moving to Oxford. It didn't seem like somewhere like anywhere else I'd ever been. So I ended up applying to a college called Reuben College, which is the newest college in Oxford. I was actually part of its first ever cohort of students. It's now in its 3rd year. And I really like it there because it's a brand new college. There's like no traditions. There's no kind of like kind of established ways of doing things. It's like very new and open, and anyone can like contribute ideas to how the college should be run. And yeah, I kind of have been really involved in college life. That's kind of been most of what I do outside of the kind of like research, is I do a lot of college-based stuff. So I've been like a social secretary, helped plan a charity ball, currently a welfare officer, which is really nice. So yeah, I ended up very happy with my college choice, but I know a lot of people like kind of prefer the older, more established colleges. So I think there's kind of a lot of things to consider. But another consideration was that Reuben guarantees accommodation for first year students. So you obviously have to pay for it, but you have a room kind of like set aside for you, which was quite nice because moving to a new city is like really stressful. So kind of having that sorted and like not worrying about landlords was really nice. And I'll pass on to someone else now.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. Hi, my name's Ramesh. I'm a 3rd year on the NERC DTP, and I'm on the biodiversity and ecology stream. I'm originally from Belfast, but I did my bachelor's degree in Queen Mary in University of London. And then that was just a 3-year bachelor's, and I came straight to the DTP without a master's, which the DTP is really accommodating of just because of the training year. And throughout the program, there's a lot of training and networking and opportunities to grow. During my bachelor's, though, I did do a lot of internships and extracurriculars, and I knew I wanted to do a PhD, but I didn't really know how to finance a master's, especially because Queen Mary doesn't have integrated master's programs, so I'd need to pay for it outright. So I tried my luck at applying for some PhDs out of the gate, and luckily I ended up here. I didn't really know how to navigate applications. I had a lot of support from my supervisors, and they, just like Nat, encouraged me to apply for the DTP just because there's a lot of flexibility, and that's what drew me to it. But yeah, I'm researching the kind of cumulative human impacts on global rocky shore communities, mainly at the low tide, so lots of marine stuff, barnacles, algae, all that fun stuff. I'm supervised between biology and geography because I have a science policy side of things. And there's a lot of opportunities in my project for fieldwork and global collaborations and networks with other institutions, because my experiment is kind of repeated globally to see if there's biogeographic impact on communities. Yeah, outside of that, I'm based at Pembroke College, which was kind of weird to get there ultimately. I was originally in Linacre College whenever I first came to Oxford, and then just because of logistical reasons, I migrated to Pembroke at the start of my second year, which was amazing. Pembroke, I'm very biased, but is an amazing college. It's very well known for having a lot of welfare and being very wholesome and inclusive. And that was something really important to me whenever I was choosing a college for the second time. It has a very good reputation, and something else that I wanted to consider whenever I applied for colleges was how touristy they are, because I wanted something a little bit more student oriented and a bit less scary. So Pembroke is a bit more out of the way from the bigger colleges, but it still maintains that traditional classical looking Oxford, and it has a lot of its own traditions and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm involved in a lot of the music at Pembroke. I'm a choral scholar, I'm an instrumental scholar, and then I play in a bunch of orchestras and stuff throughout Oxford, which is great because postgraduate study is a bit more self-oriented, so you can schedule your time a bit better, and you get to exploit Oxford for more than just your degree, which is amazing. Yeah, that's pretty much me.
I can take it after. Yeah. I'm Cumin, so I'm third year, excuse me, third year DPhil in biology, and I'm in biodiversity streams like Ramesh and Nat. I did my undergrad at Tulane, which is in the United States, in New Orleans, and then I had my year off because it was pandemic. I was working in Seoul. Then I applied. While I was working, I applied to be in NERC DTP, which I fortunately got. The reasons for applying was the Oxford University, when I was researching, had best resources for the type of research I wanted to do. I was interested in doing some research in intersection between biomechanics and ecology, and there were very good established labs for both of those fields. So I reached out to a supervisor I wanted to work with, and he basically told me this program was available. So that was the primary reason for me to apply. During the application process, I did get a lot of help from my own supervisor because at the time he could not really be at the panel when I was supposed to give the interview. So he just helped me out with the application and document proposes more than interview itself. And that really helped me to get onto the interview and perform as the way I liked, I think. My research spheres are in flight biomechanics, but also the decision-making side of it. So now I'm studying the flight strategy and how birds respond to different risks in nature by choosing where to go and adopting their flights to it. My college is called Jesus College, which at the moment when I was applying sounded a bit religious, but it's just another college name. And I applied because my supervisor is a fellow there, and I was promised a brand new accommodation for postgrads 2 years ago. And when I arrived, it was slightly delayed, but we ended up getting there anyway. So if you do apply to Jesus College, you have a very good advantage of having a brand new, quite new graduate accommodation at the very, very central area of town, if that might entice you. I really had a lot of advantage, a lot out of college life because Jesus College is known as quite friendly. It is has some Welsh association attached to it. So I started out as a social secretary, as Nat did, and got involved in social life at my college a lot. And it's also my third year rowing for the college. Rowing in Oxford sounded really intimidating at the time I was arriving, but it ended up being a quite nice part of my life outside of my DPhil. So I feel still quite attached to my college in the third year of my DPhil. Student life, generally, I think it does get different year by year. In my freshers year, I was more into getting to know other people and exploring the city and enjoying some social life. But now I'm really getting into research and wanting to get some results out of my degree. Therefore, it's not like you need to have the entire plan for your 4 years of DPhil. And I think it is very worth of you to try and see what can happen just from applying. Yeah, and that's it.
Okay, I'll go for the final one. So I'm Ollie. So I'm originally from Barton under Needwood. So it's in the Midlands. It's not a million miles from Birmingham. And so before coming to Oxford, I was an undergraduate at the University of East Anglia. So I did a course very similar to Andrew. So we're in the same cohort, and I'm also in my final year. And I think actually, Andrew, we were in the same applications for other places in that year as well. So a lot of people who ended up coming here, we were bumped into each other all around the country. So I did an integrated master's similarly in meteorology and oceanography. And so I wanted to do my PhD in oceanography because something I just have always found really interesting. It's a bit of a weird niche, but basically it's something that I've always really just loved. And so I was looking for loads of different places, lots of different projects. And I suppose two big reasons to come here. One is I had sort of a huge amount of admiration for the ability to have this period at the start to do some training, to recognize the fact that you kind of don't come in as this fully formed researcher, and you actually need quite a bit of time to sort of work out who you are, how you're going to do research, and also develop your project. And that's really important. You have a lot of power to develop the project the way you want it. The other side of it is the bit of advice I was given, which I would give to everybody, which is don't choose the project, choose the supervisor. And that goes for not necessarily just like, even if you come to Oxford where you haven't necessarily got your project at the start, when you're talking to supervisors, you need to kind of have to think about, am I going to gel with this person? They're almost like a parent for 4 years in some ways. Like, you need to have this relationship where you work collaboratively, but they've got to understand you as a human being. Like, the days when and the months when it gets really hard in your PhD, are they going to be there for you and tell you, have like a week off or whatever you need, as much as they are there for you in your academics as well. So that's always a bit of advice that I've always kept dear to me, because it was really important in deciding to come here. In terms of the project that I do, so I work on a bit of the ocean circulation called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, which gets a lot of press. And basically what we do is we try and work out how this massive global ocean conveyor belt, which brings heat towards us in the up in the northern latitudes, how does this kind of consist of all of these different flow pathways? And we work this out using models where we basically put loads of virtual water particles in our models and determine where they go. So they flow all around the ocean, and we basically work out how they get colder along stream, and work out where this happens and how this might change in the future as we impact the climate. So it's been a super cool project, and one of the things that I've benefited from here is the ability to collaborate, not just in the UK but internationally. And so another thing I would say is, if you have a project that is affiliated program where you can interact with lots of scientists, then that's really helpful. I think Ramesh mentioned that earlier, and that is something where you can grow a lot, because it's not just you and your supervisor, you get experiences from elsewhere. In terms of college, so I originally applied to St. Cat's, but actually ended up getting a scholarship and changed. And I think this has happened to a lot of people, to Teddy Hall. Teddy Hall was a super friendly college, and we had accommodation provided. That was a real plus. Myself and Andrew were the beloved COVID start year, so we did our initial training online. So I actually only spent about 48 hours in my accommodation provided by Teddy, which was amazing. 48 hours, I should say. It's a really nice accommodation. But then ended up doing like the training online. So, but I will say, given that we had online training, we had a really, really, really productive training session, and as a cohort, we learned a huge amount. I probably have a different perspective on college, I imagine, to most people, which is that I was kind of closer with it in my first years, and my partner works outside of science, and so now I kind of begun to treat my PhD more as a job. particularly in the last year. So now I have less of a role for in that sense. That's a very personal decision, and I think that is, I'm not going to say recommending it, it's just me and my life. But it's just to say that there are lots of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be integral to you, although there's a huge amount of value out of that. You can also have your PhD as sort of a job if that's how what works for you in kind of maintaining your work-life balance. Something that people haven't mentioned before, but I think it's super helpful to mention, is you can tutor. And I know probably nearly everyone here I recognise from I've done some, so I'm based in the Department of Earth Sciences, even though I'm an oceanographer. And we have some really, really great tutoring opportunities. And I think even as for you to develop personally, is to teach people is a really amazing thing. So you know that you know what you're telling someone. It's a real skill, but also the fact that it is another income stream. So I have to be honest that the world's not cheap, and tutoring does offer a way for you to supplement that and also gain some experience. Yeah, what else was on the list? Broader student life. So yeah, I think I can't say enough about how amazing Oxford and Oxfordshire is as a place as well. So beyond just being in the city, Oxfordshire is a beautiful county, and as well as, as time goes on and you move out of maybe college and move and live with other people. One thing that you'll be able to do is obviously explore the area, and we've got great transport networks to places like London and elsewhere in the country. So yeah, we're really nicely connected, especially if you start to want to travel to other unis and meet people and interact with other people. So that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you, guys. So that's you've covered quite a lot of different perspectives and information there. So maybe we could open up the Q&A and see if our participants have any other questions that they would like to ask our students about student life, colleges, perhaps the application process, which I know is quite involved, isn't it? I mean, it's quite a long process, and you have to pull together all this different stuff, and you've got the whole departments and the DTP and what's the difference. And so maybe I'll just give our participants a minute or two to see if there's any questions that they would like to ask our student panel. Oh yes, a couple have popped up. Did many of you visit your departments or colleges before you applied? Anyone? No? No.
I did not visit because it was
A long way.
it was a long way, and it was during kind of COVID times, so I was putting a lot of faith in it being okay. But what I found quite helpful was like Instagram and YouTube and even TikTok. Like there's a lot of people who kind of like post like videos and photos of like what their day is like in Oxford, which I find like quite reassuring to kind of know that even though I hadn't visited it, it's pretty nice, as Oliver said.
Yeah, I was kind of the same. I actually had a student mentor because I did Uni Plus, which is like the graduate outreach internship system over the summer. So I had a mentor who was in the biology department. So he just kind of did a video call and showed me around, gave me some advice and stuff. But yeah, I was the same. It was COVID, and yeah, that's what you can do.
Cool. So here's a good question. Do you have any tips for getting in touch with professors? Did you have difficulty getting responses?
So I can add to that. It's really scary. It's really, really scary to get in touch with professors, of any professor, actually. But I think, so I was applying to 3 different programs at the moment, and then I was sending emails to professors, and just make sure that it's polite. As long as it's polite and you get your interest across, I think it's the most you can do. And it's always better to reach out to them than not. So I understand it can be really quite intimidating, but there's no other better way of doing it. And also, if we end up working with the person, and if the interests click, they will respond. And if not, if they don't respond, it can happen. Don't get too disheartened by it neither. So I guess my answer to did you have difficulty getting responses? No, for the ones that I was going to end up with anyway. He just responded right away in a couple day or two. And you also have to, it might be relieving to know that professors actually really want to get students. It's good for them that they have students as well, because you bring new ideas and you bring new projects, and if you are in this program, you're also bringing money literally to the lab as well. So although you are emailing to them to adopt you as student, also think it in that way that you are also bringing benefits to them. So it's kind of a mutual thing when you are reaching out to them.
Yeah, and I'd also say don't worry if there's like a slight delay in hearing back from academics, because sometimes some academics are a bit better at answering their emails than others, and quite a few of them will have a very full inbox. So if they don't respond right away, don't worry about it. But also, I'm not sure what the other panelists think, but it's probably okay to, if you haven't heard after like a week or something, it's probably okay to send like a follow-up email as well.
Worth saying that if you're particularly interested in joining a research group as well, there's no harm once you've had a chat with your academic, the person you're interested in, to talk to people in their research group. Current PhD students, you can look at the names on the Oxford web pages and things like that, and you can get a lot of information in terms of what a person's like if you ask someone who's currently being managed by them. And there'll be probably a more transparent impression of what someone's like as a manager, as a supervisor, holistically as well as academically. If you are interested in joining a group, but feel like you need a little bit more details about the person.
And talking to academics as well, like Ollie mentioned, I'd really recommend like asking them how often they meet their students and how long for, and whether that's on like a one-to-one basis or whether that's part of like a big group meeting, just to make sure you kind of know exactly what you're signing up for. And different people want different amounts of supervision. But for me, I have like a one-on-one meeting every week, which is scheduled in the diary with my supervisor. And definitely, I really appreciate having that regular contact. And I think for me, that's made a big difference in my experience. But some people will want different amounts of contact. So that's just kind of something I think a really important thing to try and find out.
That's great. Thank you. That's lots of really good info there. Got more questions coming in though, so I'm going to keep moving through them to try and get as many answered as we can. So when preparing your applications, how did you manage to create outstanding statements of purpose? Any tips?
I don't necessarily know if I would I don't think I was intending to write something outstanding. I think my kind of thought process was to be quite honest and like have a lot of personality more than anything. Like I could write something like very professional, but it doesn't really reflect like who I am and what I'm like as a student and a researcher. So I think I had a real focus on like honesty and kind of demonstrating who I am more than anything. Not to say that I have an outstanding personality, but I think that was what I found to be more important, was kind of because they are interested in who you are in the statement of purpose and kind of what you're like and what you're interested in. So I think the kind of honesty side of things is quite important, and just kind of not worrying too much about it being like outstanding, but more it being a good reflection of you and kind of who you are.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think the thing that helped me was making sure that everything I was trying to communicate was in a readable format, because a lot of the time I tend to just splurge my thoughts and it's not coherent. So the main sort of exercise I guess I did was just bullet point absolutely everything that I wanted included in the first place, then just subdivide from there. See if there's a trend that you're linking out from all those bullet points, if it's like a shared theme or a shared idea that you want to get across. Maybe it's your creativity, maybe it's your experience, etc. Just picking out trends of everything that you blah onto a page and then go from there. And that just helps make sure that what you're trying to communicate as your special thing is actually getting across. Otherwise, they're never going to know. Yeah.
And I will add to that, after you've done everything Ramesh and Nat explained, I also reached out a lot to just my friends to look over my application as well, because especially for me, English is my second language, so I'm always aware there might be some like article that I had to put that looks weird to native speakers. And especially if you have a bit more senior academic or professor that you work with, or even a postdoc that you are close with, don't be afraid to reach out to them to read your statement of purpose in some more scientific way, to just to make sure that you have shown all your experiences and knowledge in the area that you're applying to.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry about the rustling just then. I've got a really over-enthusiastic kitten on the table shredding my notebook, so I'm going to have to mute myself in between. Do different DTP students in each cohort get to know each other, for example, in the first year of the programme?
Yes, I think if I understand the question correctly, then when you start out, obviously it's now done in person, but even when we started out, you start as a cohort together across all the streams, all interacting at the same time, doing a series of kind of compulsory training features, and then now even more so than when I started, but there's even more flexibility now on top of that in terms of shaping that your own way. So some of the core training include things that everyone will benefit from. So the ability to write, communicate, those kind of fundamentals, and some things around kind of your, everybody will use some form of computation to some lesser or greater extent. So there's targeted bits of courses like that. And then there'll be later on things which are more specific to your stream. But the whole point of that first term as you come in is to really try and integrate the groups together so that there's constant knowledge sharing amongst you backwards and forwards, and also even across cohorts, as in terms of your second and third year cohorts above you will do graduate research seminars as well, which they'll take you through the process within your given department, or it can be a sub-department, about what to expect next. So there's like a constant knowledge sharing, both in terms of like downwards in the timeline, but also across between you as well.
How much can the utilisation of the first training year vary? If you feel more ready to get started with research, can you? And is there any specified amount of work that has to be completed by the end of the year, such as literature review?
I've heard this vary slightly between people, but I think for myself and a lot of people in my cohort, the first term, Michaelmas term, from September, October until Christmas, New Year, is very busy with training. You kind of focus on the training courses and getting to know people and like settling in. I didn't really do too much to do with my research during that term. A little bit of thinking about kind of what my research questions might be, but then from the new year until around May time was when we really started focusing on kind of writing like a mini proposal of what our PhD is going to look like. So during that time, there was a bit less training. It wasn't every day, sometimes it wasn't even every week. So I used that time to talk to supervisors and do reading and kind of come up with like coherent ideas and kind of go back and forth between supervisors about them. So the research didn't really fully start until kind of June, July time. And there's no requirement to have any part of your PhD done in that first year. There's DTP assignments you have to do, so kind of thinking about research questions and that mini 2-page proposal in your first year, but there's kind of no requirement to have kind of PhD level research done in that year. But I have heard some people, if they have a really good idea of their project, they do kind of get going with the literature review like slightly earlier and things like that. But I don't know if anyone here has kind of a different take on the first year.
Sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, in the first year in the summer, it was not really during term time, but in the summer there was already a project that was going on in my lab that I could hop into and then work with and learn the process. So that's what I did quite intensively for the length of the summer, but also because that part of the research haven't really got analyzed yet. So it was not like it was, I'm not yet sure if that data is going to form my DPhil research. It was mostly, I think I approached it mostly as experiencing how the PhD life looks like and how the pipeline looks like in the flat research. So I would say it was mostly explorative, but I have seen some people who go into mostly testing out, exploring what kind of setup they'll be working with and what kind of experimenter controls they would have. So I think it's mostly exploring generally. But okay. Different ways.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Shall I move on to the next question, or does anyone want to? Okay, that seemed like a pretty good summary to me. Any advice for future applicants? What would you have done differently? Well, you all got in, so.
For the just sake of my peace of mind, I might have reached out to my supervisor earlier. I think the deadline when my cohort applied, it was in end of January, is that right? And I only contacted him like 2nd of January or something. So I really had tight schedule, getting to know him, hearing yes, preparing my statement and interview. So I would have definitely reached out earlier, although sending email is intimidating. Just get over that fear and probably contact him in November or something would have been better for my mental well-being. Yeah.
My advice would be to do with references. So I kind of had no idea how asking for references worked when I was applying, and I just kind of emailed 3 people I work with and said, can you give me a reference for my application? And I got feedback from a PhD program that I was unfortunately rejected from, that those references were very generic and not very good. And I was told that I should have communicated to my referees what I wanted them to say about me, which I at the time thought I couldn't do. I thought that would be like inappropriate, but apparently that's a really common thing that people do. So you say, this is what I'm applying for. I've done these things that I think you should highlight. And then you get like a much more personalized reference from them that is a really good reflection of the skills that will be useful for this program. So I really wish that I had known that I could do that and kind of have much stronger references.
That's really interesting, Nat. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to go on that one, or shall I move to the next one? Would you recommend going straight into a PhD without gaining any work experience?
Oh, sorry, Ollie, do you want to go first? Or? Okay. It's tricky because I came straight from 3-year bachelor's with no job experience in the middle of it. I'd done some sort of like helping out in one of the labs, but no actual employed experience. It's not that I wouldn't recommend it, but I also wouldn't. It doesn't act against you. The PhD is what you make of it, and you learn on the job. You treat a PhD just like a job, just with a bit more innate flexibility to it, and you're getting to explore something that you feel very passionately about, and you're working at the forefront of your preferred topic. My whole reason why I wanted to go straight into it from the get-go was because my field was still very much in its infancy, and I had an opportunity with funding for a 4-year position in a realm of something that I really love, and I wanted to be part of it from the get-go. That said, it would have benefited me to do some work experience just in terms of professional management, administrative duties, logistics, just knowing who I am as a person a bit better before starting such a big job. But you learn as you go. It's just like any other position. And I think if you feel strongly about your topic, you you should jump at it while you have the chance and while there's still active work going on in your field.
I suppose I would sort of say that it doesn't need to be so much of a dichotomy. I think we often think of it as you either work in industry or you become a PhD student and spend your life in academia. The DTP's job is not to produce necessarily academics, it's to produce people who are good scientists and have amazing skills, which can go on and do a whole host of different things. And so one of the things that you are actively encouraged to do as you're here, if you want to, is to do internships and get experience outside of it. And so earlier this year, I went and worked for a startup company in climate analytics, working out of London. So it was 3 months of developing some stuff with them, totally different world in every single sense. And you realize very quickly how transferable the skills are. You know, you're not everything that you do, you kind of see whilst you're doing in your PhD through the prism of like academic research. But loads of those skills are very transferable. And so in many ways, the notion of doing your PhD, I think Ramesh makes a fantastic point. You make of it what you will. You have loads of opportunities. Oxford's training programs that are available are nuts, the amount of things that you could go and do. So treat it as a 4-year opportunity to, yes, get this degree, but also do all of these other things around the edges. And so you can have this combination of your kind of academic and your industry, and then you could work at, or you could choose to carry on in some kind of postgraduate study if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think some people do have work experience before starting, and some people don't. So it totally varies. And to kind of answer like a question further down as well, which I think is related, that there are people who start the DPhil as older candidates as well. So not everyone starts aged 20 or 21. You'll get people older than that as well, because they've had maybe maybe they've worked before, maybe they've been like had another position or something as well. So it totally varies.
Thank you. How flexible is the program in terms of time management, holidays, fieldwork, etc.?
From my perspective, I've heard this is like very variable depending on what kind of work you do and your supervisor. So for me in the summer, if I'm doing field work, I don't have a lot of flexibility because I have like samples that need to be collected on certain days at certain times. But when I'm in the office or the lab, how I manage my time is entirely up to me. My supervisors don't really mind what days and times I'm around and working, as long as things get done. Same with holidays. I don't necessarily have to put in like a formal request to say, I want this week to go XYZ. I just kind of, they trust that I can set up my time as I see fit, and everything kind of gets done. But I've heard from other people who do more lab-based things that there is a bit more of a kind of scheduling type thing, because you kind of have more like time pressing things to do. But that's just my experience, is it's very flexible.
I think during the training, it's a bit more like being a student, where you have term time, you're here from the first week until the final week, and you've got courses throughout that. And then maybe you've got like longer Christmas holiday, maybe you've got like 4, 5, 6 weeks off for Christmas or something. But then after you finish that training course, you then move on to being a PhD student, which is a little bit closer to, or can be closer to, having a job. So my work is just purely based on a computer. So for me, it's totally flexible about when I can take holiday. I think the department says that like the expectation is you take around 30 days holiday a year, but like my supervisor doesn't really like mind too much about it. I don't have to like book holiday. So it's just something that I kind of decide myself.
Cool. Can you talk about the themes you discussed in your personal statements? If you can remember.
I actually remember this because I sent it to my master's student today. The best piece of advice I was ever given was to synthesize your personal characteristics within the realms of the program. So NERC has a bunch of different remits, they call it, associated with the council. So things like conservation science or global change or microbiome or just whatever, there's a bunch of them. I personally decided to take 3 of them and did 3 main paragraphs in my personal statement, and then synthesized how those remits I've met or I'm developing myself through internships or a particularly interesting module in my degree or a volunteering thing or something. So like conservation science, I was like, oh, this is a NERC remit, great. I did some conservation science in my degree. I may have done particularly well, and I'm doing an internship. And it just shows that you're going a bit more above and beyond and developing your interest, specifically in something that NERC explicitly finds interesting. And that was the main way that I structured it. Again, it feeds into the whole readability aspect of it. So I did 3 main paragraphs of 3 different remits and then rounded it out. And I think that helped me a lot, both from getting it looked at, but also just so then I could structure my own thoughts and know why I was applying. Yeah.
Mine was slightly different from Ramish's. I'm just going to highlight it because we both ended up here, so I assume neither is right or wrong. But my kind of personal statement section was like a lot more personal. I felt like I didn't really have much experience related to my PhD to offer. So I kind of the thing I'm most interested in is insects and insect biodiversity. So I wrote quite a bit about how I came to be interested in insects and kind of how that is something that I like developed like in my childhood and then through university, not necessarily through like particular opportunities and courses, but just kind of like a personal passion, and kind of went for that slightly more personal side of things.
I've got a couple of questions about colleges, which maybe we could lump together because time is running out. How much of a difference would choice of college make during life at Oxford? And what would be a general idea to go about choosing a college at the time of application?
I can add into that because I initially applied as open application because I was basically applying in rush, and some 40 different colleges were too overwhelming to me to look one-to-one. So I just went with what my supervisor was associated with. But I think now looking back, I think that was quite lucky that he was a part of a college that had a lot of postgraduate funding, which Jesus had. Jesus has about £800 annual graduate student allowance, which really helped me with my research and research expenses or accommodation for field work. But I would think sometimes I think one of the biggest lies is that you can go to any college and you will love it absolutely, because not a college it's quite based that not all college could be the favorite to everyone. You can have quite different experience in each college depending on what kind of environment you are in. So I would say maybe think about what you find as really important from college life. If you're not going to engage in college life anyway, it could be any college. But if you really think community matters and if you want to be a part of college life, maybe it is worth looking into colleges that are known to be more open, more friendly, and inclusive. Or if you think that your research might be a high cost and might need some more money, it might be worth looking into actually some website and see what kind of grants should be available for postgraduates. And some of it I thought were quite hidden, so it might also be worth just emailing directly to the academic office. There are academic offices for each college, so if you email them, they'll be quite happy to reply if available.
I think I got quite caught up when I was applying in like panicking that I was going to end up like at a not nice college, and there's like lots of like silly articles online that like rank colleges like based on like how good they are. But I think like even if you don't get the college you want or end up at a college that people say is not good, like one of two things will happen. You will end up liking that college and meeting people there that you get along with, and that's great. But ultimately, if you really are not a fan of like the community in your college, or you're just not interested in that, then you still have an entire department and the DTC. And a lot of people just don't really engage with their college. They maybe go to a dinner sometimes, but they have more friends and kind of do more of their socializing within the department and with people that they like research with. So I think even if you don't get the college you want, or you get a college that people kind of like say is not good, like it's not going to define your whole experience in Oxford. Like there are so many ways to engage with the city and the university that ultimately you'll still have a great time.
Lovely, thank you both. This is a question that has come up a lot today, and I think it's something that's obviously worrying a lot of potential applicants. Did you have peer-reviewed publications before applying?
None, not a single one. I said in my application that I had one in draft, but like in reality that was just my bachelor's project. We were planning to maybe submit it as a paper, so I put it in my like extended CV as we might publish this, but I had absolutely nothing to my name.
Anyone else? Any publications?
So at the moment I didn't have publication, but I had one that I submitted and one actually rejected. And then that's just what I said. Actually one paper I said it was impressed, but it was actually rejected. And they asked me what journal it was impressed, and I had to tell them it was rejected. But yeah, only because I was going to prepare it again. But yeah, all jokes aside, it is not significant that you need to have peer-reviewed publication, and it's really hard to have your peer-reviewed publication before PhD. Where could you possibly do research and go through all these hoops to have peer-reviewed publication? But if you do have it, it's fantastic, but it's very, very unlikely that anybody would have one. And if you don't have one, that should not be a reason that you are not applying to the DTP. But if you do have research experience, as Ramesh said, it could get many highlights, but yeah, no way near peer-reviewed publication.
Thank you all for stomping on that dreadful misinformation that's going all over Twitter. It's ridiculous.
Victoria, can I add as well, just to add to the extra stomp? It's a bit of a mad thought, but it's akin to really going on the first day of your apprenticeship if you were going to become a bricklayer and then saying like, which house have you built and can you show me a picture? Like you're coming here to learn like the full process of how to do it. If you have and you've had experience working with people, it's really great, and that puts you in a great position. But the whole point for everyone is that it should feel included, that regardless of your previous experiences, because there's a lot of people that have a whole host of different reasons for why they want to do a PhD, and they might not have come from a bachelor's, they might not have come from a master's, they might have had years out, they might have done something else. The whole point is that this is meant to be a 4-year process to get you to the point where you can write papers and you can collaborate with people. So that's what that period early on is, where we learn to write and communicate together. So that's all I would add to stomp on it a bit more.
Yeah, and I'll just say the vast majority of PhD students I know here in Oxford did not have any peer review publications.
So I'm just trying to cherry pick the last couple of questions. What relationship with the supervisor have you experienced during your PhD in terms of their expectations of you, the development of your own ideas, and help with the feasibility of your project? That is a huge question. Maybe just one or two of you might want to talk about supervisor relationships. And
I think one thing that is important to highlight is that I think it is expected, and most people end up with a team rather than just a single supervisor. So I have 3 supervisors right now that kind of are involved to different extents, depending on whether I'm doing statistics or policy work or writing. And yeah, I kind of chose them based on academic interest being shared, but also like kind of the vibes. I wanted someone who was like positive and supportive, and yeah, I think that was kind of very important to me, that there could be like a really good relationship there where I feel like I can talk to them about anything and I'm not like scared or worried about what the outcome's going to be.
I would add to that, because I think that's really, really important advice, that when I was advised about like the most important thing is choose the supervisor, not the project, one of the interesting things that came up with that, and I think is a principle that I would just say to people to apply in general in life, is surround yourself with people whose attributes you would like to embody. If your supervisor has really good work-life balance, or your supervisor is a really compassionate person, or you want a supervisor who is very kind of critical of thought and recognizing here like the things that you probably don't have at this moment in time but you might like to develop. I have a supervisory team with myself and 2 people. I'd like to think at this point we see each other as somewhat equals, and I think of us as, I'm the person who comes with crazy ideas. We have one person who sort of says, how realistic is that? And we have another person that is absolutely the boss of technical details and how we could actually deliver it. And between the 3 of us, we managed to do science. And we all bring different attributes. And I think this process has just made me gain like their little skills and think the way they think. So I'd say try and find people who have things that you'd like to embody.
And I guess following on from that, at what points did each of you have a good idea who you would want as the main supervisor for your project?
I think I knew, like, in the middle of Hillary term to be like specific, but what made me comfortable with my supervisor was she invited me to come to some of her lab meetings, as did other potential supervisors. But going to the lab meetings not only gets a good idea of how they operate within their research group, but also just their personal demeanor. How do they talk to their students? How do they talk to their employees? What are their reasonable expectations of their workloads? Just so then you can see, okay, realistically, whenever I join this lab, or if I do, what's going to be asked of me and is it realistic? And that helped me a lot. I ended up dropping a few potential supervisors just because they didn't seem to be healthy lab groups, and they seemed not only stressful, but just unrealistic in goals. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to be here for 4 years, I'll make it worth it. I'll do something that keeps me sane and something that makes me happy. And yeah.
I think not only talking to students in their lab group, a good piece of advice was just to talk to anyone in the department and kind of mention that you're thinking of having this supervisor and just kind of seeing their reaction. Because kind of PhD students, we all talk to each other like across groups. We're all very chatty and kind of share experiences, and maybe the people in that group are very happy at the moment, but maybe there are students who've moved groups for particular reasons, or they felt it wasn't a good fit, and you can kind of learn from them as well. So I would say take in like some broad opinions on your potential group.
My experience might be slightly varied because I really went for the study area that I was going to be in to choose supervisors. So there are not very much of a vibe selection. Although one thing that I did as my due diligence was I was in a conference and I did talk to the students who were being supervised by my supervisor. And later on, for choosing my secondary supervisor, I talked to the students in that group as well. So it is really, I think it was really helpful for me to go in. If your supervisor is not going to be as supportive, friendly, open, dedicated, I thought it still was helpful for me to know how much of a vibe he has, and then going into it prepared, and then keep sharing information on how I'm going to mitigate that. So I think there is no real complete failure in any process of PhD where your supervisor, your college, things can work out or not work out, and there are always ways to mitigated or enhanced in one way or the other.
So it's basically quite different timings for all of you then on the like when you picked your supervisors. And I think that's kind of the point of the DTP, isn't it? You have quite a long lead-in time before you start your project. If you're not sure, but if you do know, you can kind of get cracking a lot sooner. Would you mind just maybe doing 2 more questions, guys? There are 2 more questions that I think would be nice to finish off with. So the first one is, do you have any advice for how to communicate the outcomes of research experiences if they didn't result in papers or presentations? So for example, an assistantship or a project that maybe you couldn't complete.
I'd say I would flip it and reframe it in that I think every project you learn something from. There's, even if the outcome is not what we traditionally deem the outcome to be, that'll be in a publication or a conference paper. We had a wonderful talk recently in our research group where we invited back someone who'd just finished their PhD not that long ago, and I asked specifically them to put a slide in where of what their PhD looked like versus what it looked like when they wrote their proposal. And it was one of the most entertaining slides ever because it showed you how messy science is, how it went all over the place, how ideas just flipped and changed, and things that dropped. They included like 3 or 4 things that you might have thought were going to be thesis chapters once upon a time. But the point was, the guy who did it, Andrew, got to the end of it and said, every single one of those experiences made me a better scientist, so that the things that you see that I publish now look the way they do. And I would use that as, if I was worried, like thinking about this as an interview question or anything, is to say what it's made you into now and how you would go about a problem differently given that experience, and taking it on board.
Yeah, just add to that, I think even if it doesn't, like Ollie was saying, even if it doesn't result in a paper or presentation, you can still get useful experiences out of it and learn useful things. So I'd probably, in an application, try and reflect that in just providing like evidence for what you've done, of like, I've used like this technique to analyze X number of samples or something, and just kind of, yeah, try and provide like concrete examples of what you've done, even if they haven't resulted in like a paper or a presentation. That's still really useful. Thank
you. And interviews, can you tell us about interview experiences, and so what were the interviews like? What sort of things were asked?
I went absolutely like slightly mad before my interview and prepared like all of these cue cards of like most common PhD interview questions and like rehearsed them, and it was a really like kind of nutty time. And then I sat down for my interview and immediately forgot about the cue cards and had like the most normal conversation with a group of academics. Like it was I was like ready to be grilled on like why I wanted to do a PhD, why would I be good at it, da da da. But it was like a very nice conversation about, so why are you interested in that? Like, why are you passionate about that? Kind of, what do you think about this as well? How could that link into your research interest? It was like so chill. And afterwards, I just kind of sat there feeling like a little bit silly for being so mad about it. And I did put the cue cards in the bin afterwards. But yeah, it was so chill. I really don't like interviews, and I found it to be like quite a pleasant experience.
Yeah, exact same. I prepared like a massive Google sheet with a bunch of questions that I thought would be like, "Ooh, I look so smart." But then the call was so conversational, and ultimately they have your application, they know your metrics, they know your transcript, they know your internships, all that, whatever. So the interview was a lot more just chatty, and to see like Nat said, more your personal characteristics, why you're actually just interested in something versus I've done X, Y, Z. It's not to show off, it's just to get an idea of who you are more so as a person and what you have to offer the program, but also what the program could benefit from having you on it. It's very, very pleasant, very nice.
My interview, I'm jealous, you guys. Anyway, my interview was really academic, so I don't know why it was supposed to be like that. I think maybe this was a departmental one. So in application, I applied directly to Department of Zoology, which was back then zoology, and also NERC program and then BBSRC. So the interview that I had was from the department. And then I think somehow it functioned as DTP interview as well. I don't know what the process it was. But anyway, if you're going to have, I was informed what the format is going to be. So mine was, it was going to be 20 minutes presentation about my research or whatever I did. And then after that, it was questions time for another 20 minutes. So the perception I had is where I finished my presentation, and then there were some quite challenging questions. And I think their idea was to see how I'm thinking. So they wanted to see how I might think about potential assumptions or challenges that are in my projected research or previous research. So I don't think that those were meant to really like test you. And what if those come up in your interviews, my advice would be, you can take a minute to think about it. Like just take like 30 long seconds to think about it, and then you can really bring out what you would have thought in your calm mind state. And I think eventually it went fine. And yeah, so hope that helps.
The only thing I would add from my experience, which was similar to Nat and Ramesh, is I think a lot of the time you can work yourself up because you think of an interview as being like an obstacle course where they want to throw you out and find a way for you not to get through. And I think probably my experience and a lot of people's experience is the Oxford interview process is a lot more like them providing you a stage to perform on. And it's your job to communicate what they know on paper, but really put your personality into it. That's the point. You go from being like a piece of A4 paper and a name to being a person that they will hopefully remember from, because you're personal and you've got so much about you. And that means also not just your academics. That means you and what you do outside of it. And I think that's really important given the world we live in, that you have a story. I mean, that's a good piece of advice I think you can find, is just know your story about why you're here, why you're doing this, what motivates you and makes you get up every day. And that will carry you a long way in the interview process because they know all of the academic details already.
Oh, Andrew, did you say anything about your interview?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got too much more to add from that, other than I guess also it's like kind of a two-way street as well. So it's also the opportunity to maybe find out a bit more about like the project or the supervisor or the program as well. So it's not just you like impressing them, but like working out if it's also a good fit for you as well.
Great. Thank you. Oh, well, I'm sorry we took you 10 minutes over, but I think those last two questions were really good ones. So I did want to squeeze those in. Very sorry to all of those people whose questions we didn't get to. I think we got to most of them though. So thank you very much. I don't think I've ever known this many questions be asked on a Zoom meeting. There's literally 157 that I've answered and another 114 to go. So well done, participants. Thank you very much to our student panel.
Thank you much. Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck.